Good evening. You know, there are moments in every person's life that remain etched in our memories, and we never forget them. One such moment occurred 50 years ago when I was a young 15-year-old adolescent. You want to calculate my age? Go ahead. And I was at home in Brooklyn, and something that never happened in my entire life. Suddenly, in mid-afternoon, my father, Gershon Jacobson, the world-renowned journalist, shows up. I barely would see him in the evenings or in the mornings. He was never home. I didn't need therapy for that, just for the record. And my father walks through the doors, and I asked him, "What are you doing here?" You know, it was like, and I wished he said, "I love you so much, I came home." Well, he said, "I'm out of a job." What happened was that morning, Arthur Jacobs, the publisher of the Day Jewish Journal, a very prominent daily Yiddish newspaper that in the 40s and 50s and even the 60s was the only paper that the Jewish people who were coming as refugees after World War II turned to. He decided to close the newspaper without asking anyone. So here it was, my father, who was the city editor at the time, the youngest man in the newsroom, out of a job. I right away asked, "Are we going to have what to eat for Shabbos?" Or, you know. But here's what happened next. Within a few weeks, my dear father, against all advice, against logic, despite all odds, with no money, with no support, decided to open up not a daily but a weekly newspaper called the Algemeiner. As I think about it today, I recognize where my father was coming from. A little history, which I'm sure somewhat is mirrored in all of your lives in some way or other if you go back a generation or two. My father was not a direct Holocaust survivor, but he was a Stalin survivor. He was born in Moscow in 1934, some of the most difficult times of life, both in Eastern Europe, as well as in the former Soviet Union. And long story short, he lost his parents at 19 years old. Both his father and mother had died in Toronto. They came out after World War II. He had two little brothers. And he never spoke about it. But his actions were louder than words, and they were not just his resilience, but I would say captured the essence of what makes Jews unique and why we're here for over 4,000 years. And that is, we're indestructible. Now, 4,000 years ago, that would have been a dream and no one would have expected it. Even after World War II, obituaries were written that the Jewish people would cease to exist by the year 1990. And the logic was clearly statistics. 6 out of 18 million Jews were decimated. The survivors were orphans, widows, widowers without family, without cities. No one wanted them. Israel had not become a state yet. So if you were a researcher, what would you expect? Most of the rabbis, the leaders, the community leaders, the teachers were completely taken from us or totally demoralized. And yet here we are. So I see my father as a representative, as I said, so many of our parents and grandparents that will never lie down and die. So when the Algemeiner closed, the first cartoon I remember in the newspaper in 1972 was a grave, Day Jewish Journal, and a new child, the Algemeiner Journal. 1972 was a momentous year. All of you are probably too young to remember this, but I could speak with my, as Ronald Reagan said, I won't take advantage of your youth and inexperience. To Mondale, famous, I don't know if you remember that. Well, anyway, 1972, on the negative side of things was the Munich massacre of 12 Israeli athletes in Munich, Germany, Olympics. Just some other historical moments. That was the year Nixon traveled to China. And in case you're into your smartphones and video games, the first video game Atari released in 1972 called Pong. Any of you still addicted to it? Or its grandchild? And Intel produced the first microchip. I think it was 8008, if my memory serves me right. So it was a watershed year, and many more battles would take place. You know, a few years later was the Yom Kippur War. And then the Intifadas. I'm not going to list everything that happened in the last 50 years. Much has changed, and some things are quite the same. But I will say this, that moment as a 15-year-old, seeing my father walk through the door, and then what he built with literally no resources, never left me. And when my father passed away 17 years ago, it wasn't even a question in my mind. It would be a disgrace, if not worse, if I didn't do at least what he tried to do, which was to not let the Algemeiner die with him. And with the help of many of you in this room right now, some of you are not here, but hopefully we'll hear this later. To my surprise, we were able to rebuild. And literally and dramatically, the landscape has changed. It's no longer a Yiddish newspaper, but as Elie Wiesel, our dear friend and chairman over the years, always would say, he thinks in Yiddish, but then writes in French. So when you look at the Algemeiner.com, know there's the Yiddish spirit of your grandmothers and grandfathers there. Just the language may be a bit different. And their challenges are different. But these 50 years demonstrate more than ever, as my dear colleague and friend David described, the importance of media today is even greater than in 1972. Because it's no longer a weekly or a daily, it's seconds. Misinformation spreads like a virus, exponentially amplified. And how do you close that door once the Pandora's box opens? And the same thing on the positive note, when you use technology with a message, you can reach millions, billions of people. So we have our wars ahead of us, but thank God these are not wars of blood. These are not wars that were fought 80 years ago or 100 years ago in Europe or Russia or wherever it may have been. Today is a war of ideas. So on this 50th anniversary, I'd like to make the following pledge and commitment. As the Algemeiner has grown, and so much more to be done, so I made a personal commitment, which I may have shared with some of you, but I didn't formally announce it. I'm going to formally announce it now. That whatever money that was raised for this gala and continues to be raised by our dear friends and our supporters, and of course our team, our wonderful and beautiful team, powerful, committed team, working day and night, I took upon myself a commitment to raise $1 million more above that by reaching, yeah, but I can't do it without you. So be careful what you applaud for. Like they said, the rabbi gets up in a synagogue and says there's a leak in the roof. We need $100,000 to fix it. The good news is we have the money. The bad news, it's in your pockets. So my pledge is to try to, and I can't say just try, I've already succeeded to some extent, to reach 20 people who will be committed to give $50,000 each, which is $1 million, in honor of this anniversary. But it's not just an honor, we're not just celebrating a birthday party. We're celebrating the future, because there's so much to be done. We want to be able to establish in every hot zone, in every point of contact, whether it's campuses, whether it's cities, whether it's communities, whether it's government offices, places of influence, to be able to respond not just defensively, but offensively in expressing what the Jewish people represent, what Israel represents, because it's not a Jewish cause. It's a universal cause for morality. Who brought morality to this world? Let's not forget, the founding fathers of the United States read the Bible. The concept that all people are created equal and we have inalienable rights is only 300 years old, approximately. But from the biblical point of view, it's thousands of years old. And the Algemeiner lives with that spirit. So it's not just a message for Jews, from Jews, it's a message for every human being on earth, that we're all created in the divine image, and as such we have the dignity, we even have the dignity to disagree, but never to personalize. Someone asked me, but by the reception, how do you have such diverse audiences? I speak to one person who's very left-wing, this one's very right-wing. Because when you respect people, the people, no matter who you are, no matter what your opinion is, it's not about you as a person, it's about your opinion. We can disagree on opinions. I disagree with my siblings, with family members, but I love them dearly. So that's the spirit, to be able to place writers, journalists, commentators in every hot zone. That's the battleground today. And it is the ultimate war, because it's the war over minds, the minds of the young, the minds of the old. It's the war over ideas and how people will perceive themselves and the world around them. So that's my pledge, that as we enter the next 50 years, to raise a lot more than the amount I just said, but that's a good beginning. And you don't have to get up right now, but you can come over to me, or to David, or to Mendel, or to Jason, or to any one of our team, and please share with me how you would like to participate, in addition to everything else. I will continue doing the work of everything possible to make sure that we have this independent media voice that will continue to influence and continue to share the truth, integrity, authenticity, while also respecting the diversity, the harmony within diversity. So thank you all, and each of you, for your attendance here tonight. It's extremely touching to me personally, and I can say that that moment that I saw my father when I was 15 years old has bore some fruit. I by no means feel the job is over, but I can say with a little nachas and pride, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you so much.